Hi again, everyone, and welcome to the Restaurant Show podcast. This is episode number 3. I'm Christopher Wells, your host. If it's the first time you join us on this podcast, it's focused on the restaurant industry, tips, tricks, trends, all kinds of shenanigans that are related to our industry. I run a company called Restaurant Building Blocks where I coach, train, and do some keynote speaking, all related to the restaurant industry. And I figured a podcast would be a great way to share with even more people. And the first 2 episodes have been very positive. The feedback has been positive. It's a fun medium for me to share with a lot of people. And very happy to have you here with me today. We'll talk about recently got to go on vacation and some of the fun experiences that went with that. Also, I'm going to start something as the RBB mention of the week. So Restaurant Building Block mention of the week. A shout out to a restaurant that did something fun for one of their guests, and that's something I'm going to start doing from now on. And I want to talk about a little bit about some wines. I went to a nice wine tasting last week and wanted to share some of that with you. So stick around for the 3rd episode of the Restaurant Show. Let's get this show on the road. So the first thing I want to chat with you about today is I recently took a vacation with my lovely girlfriend and some dear friends of mine, and we went to St. Maarten, the Isle of St. Maarten, St. Martin on the Dutch side. So half the island is Dutch, half the island is French territory. I must say, probably the best experience I've ever had taking a trip down south. The food is amazing, which can be hard sometimes when you travel. And if you go to resorts, if you go to Cuba, if you go to different places, if you go to different islands down south, sometimes the food can be a little sketchy on resorts and stuff like that. But the food was outstanding. We had done a rental, so it wasn't like at all inclusive. So we had a lot more liberty in doing what we wanted to do, which was very enjoyable. The beaches were outstanding. Mao Beach is the world famous beach where the planes land really, really close to the beach, because the landing strip is right across from where the beach is, and it's a rather short one, so the planes have to make a short approach to make sure that they have enough runway when they land. So that was interesting to see some big planes right above our heads as we're having a beer right there on the beach. One thing that really stood out from this trip, a lesson for our industry, was the hospitality of our hosts. So we'd done a rental through a referral from someone in my family, and where they'd been there before, and they kept telling us how they were like their adoptive parents down there because they were so fantastic, and just knew that renting there was going to be just a nice spot for a very affordable price. When we did get there, they were so welcoming. They asked us to go have a little cocktail with them for cocktail hour, and as we got to chat about some of our enjoyment of food and wine, they invited us for dinner, and just their attitude in general towards their guests, and not just us but other people. They have 3 cottages that they rent. The attitude they had kind of gave me a hint that they probably didn't have a hard time renting and having people spend money and rent with them throughout the year. There's a ton of rentals in St. Maarten. There's not that many resorts. It's actually more the kind of place where you go and you rent yourself a little house, a little shack, a little room where you can go and visit the beaches. But they, when we were having dinner, I did ask the host. I said, "Are you busy year round?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm booked year round, except for July, which is a really hot month there, where people don't really feel like going down, I guess, or it's just a little too much. But other than that, they're booked throughout the year." And people will move their vacation dates to make sure that they can go and rent there. And it just goes to show that when you provide a service, provide food in a restaurant, an experience, in their case, hospitality, it's not only providing a decent place to stay, but it's also the relationship. It's something that I keep talking about. I've talked about in the other 2 episodes of this podcast. But the experience that you provide goes above and beyond just the service that you give. So in this case, they could have just charged us the price, giving us that nice room with a spa in the backyard and the barbecue, and it was a really nice setup, and that would have been the end of that. But they went above and beyond to ask, if everything was okay. They actually even left us a bottle of rum and a little bit of food when we got off the plane until we could go to the grocery store. It didn't cost them anything, but it just showed that they cared about our enjoyment of our trip. And they'd been doing this 25 years, so they could have been nonchalant about it or not cared as much. But the fact that they do care and they genuinely care transpired. And I guarantee you I'll go back there for sure someday. And I'll definitely send more people. Like my aunt sent me there. I'll definitely send them some business. And I would love to see them again. So they've built that rapport in a very short amount of time. And it's the same thing when we have our restaurant. Going into another topic I've been wanting to talk, and it's going to tie into this, but a lot of people say there's too many restaurants, right? I come from Montreal. I think 20 or 25 restaurants have opened since November in a market that's already saturated. And people say, well, there should be regulations so there's less restaurants, right? If you go to New York, if you go to Dallas, I mean, there's cities that are famous now for having a lot of restaurant per capita. And is the fact that there's too many restaurants? I don't think so. I think the fact is, how do you stand out? How do you create an experience that makes people want to come back? Okay. What makes people want to come back? The service, the atmosphere, and the food, right? If you stick to your concept and you execute that properly, you're definitely going to win. And service is not just taking an order and processing a bill, steps of service, and this is how it's done. A big part of service and what makes service stand out from one restaurant to another is the rapport with the individual, the relationship that you build with them, the knowledge of your stuff, right? Knowing your menu, knowing your wines, knowing your cocktails, knowing what you're out of, knowing what's in a dish. The knowledge and makes you look like a professional and helps the guest experience. When you have to go back to find information from the kitchen, or I'll have to check because I don't know, well, then you don't look professional. And the guest experience is, well, then they're kind of in limbo for a few minutes until they find out if they can get what they want. Now, when you know your stuff inside out, you control the experience and you provide an outstanding experience. On top of that, execution has to be there. Okay. How can you make your business better for the guests? Not for you. How can you make the experience better? How can you make it quicker? How can you make it more efficient? And when I say quicker, it doesn't have to be, we're not talking fast food here. If you're fast food, then yeah, obviously you want to be efficient at that. But if you're fine dining, you still want to get the food out in a certain amount of time. You can't say it's going to take an hour and 15 minutes for a dish because we're fine dining. So there are certain standard and execution that need to happen at the same time. So are they too many restaurants? No, I think they're too low standards for most restaurants. And obviously, when you open up, a lot of people are going to are curious and want to try a new place. The question is, are you going to be able to bring them back? When people say, well, my restaurant failed because too many other restaurants open. No, because they tried you, they tried them, and I guess the other guy won because you didn't. You need to make sure that you are covered on all bases. Okay, be true to your concept. Don't try to be everything to everyone. That's where you fail because people don't understand. They want a certain experience. I go to McDonald's for a certain experience and a burger. I go to a fine dining for a different experience. I go to a family restaurant because I know it's going to be easy. There's going to be a little kids menu, some crayons for them to color while we wait, right? So you be true to your concept and make sure that you do service well, atmosphere well for your concept and the food, but make sure that you build that rapport and that relationship and that you show your guests that you care about the money they spend with you. Once people feel like you really do care about the money they spend with you, they will definitely be more inclined and more interested in visiting you again and trying you again. And because they've built that rapport with you, right? People like to go where they feel at home, right? So make sure that you do that. Make sure that you execute properly. If there's a dish on your menu that slows down service and that cannot be delivered to the table, within 18, 20 minutes, then maybe you need to either do it differently or take it off the menu because it's causing other, probably, even if it's just that table, it's slowing down the orders on other table and it's not providing the experience that you want your guests to have. So I don't think that there are too many restaurants. I think the standards are too low. Only the strong survive. And in our business, strong means a strong experience of value for your money. You just can't say, I'm going to dump a bunch of money into a decor and we're going to open up and you're going to like it. You can't do that. And some people do think like that. And unfortunately, they're not very successful in their business. And now to talk about some people that are doing it right, I want to move on to the RBB mention of the week. So the restaurant building block mention of the week is something, a new feature I want to do where we highlight something that a restaurant did specifically well to build rapport with their guests, their experience, provide them with value. So the first mention of the week I want to do goes out to Sullivan Steakhouse in Indianapolis. So recently, the manager was looking at the reservation she had for the evening, and she noticed a note on one of the online reservations that said, "Could you please have a picture of Carlton Banks on our table?" Now, for those of you who don't know, Carlton Banks was a character in the sitcom The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, starring Will Smith, but also starred Alfonso Ribeiro playing Carlton Banks, which was the kooky cousin that was famous for his funny dance and stuff like that. So the manager was kind of taken aback, Googled it to make sure it was who she thought it was, and not sure if it was somebody that was close to them or if it was a joke or not knowing how to go about it. But she decided that if that's what the guests wanted to make their meal better, she would abide. So she found a nice picture of Carlton Banks online on it through Google, printed it, went out to a little shop close to a restaurant, bought a nice frame. You can find a nice, inexpensive frame. She went and bought a nice little frame, put the picture in there, and made sure that it was set up in the middle of the table for when they showed up. Now, when the couple showed up and they were sat, obviously the entire team in the restaurant knew of the situation and was curious to know. So they started giggling when they got to the table, and eventually the manager that had done this went to the table and said, I have to ask, what's with the picture of Carlton? Is it somebody close to you? Is it a running gag? And the couple's answer was, we've been doing this for years. When we do online reservations, we add that note because we're curious to see if restaurants actually will read the notes, and if they'll do something about it, or if it's something that's out of the ordinary, they'll just ignore it. Nobody's ever called us to ask what it was for or what it was about, and nobody's ever done it until tonight. So we're very impressed that you went out and without question just provided us with what we wanted. It was a way for us to see, if restaurants actually cared about a request, as weird as it would be. And so big ups to Sullivan Steakhouse and that manager for doing that. Now, my question to you is, what would you have done? What would you have done in your restaurant? And it's very easy to say, oh, yeah, I'll do anything for the guests. Would you have really printed a picture of Carlton Banks, put it in a frame? I'm sure some of you would have. I'd like to think that I definitely would have. I've done some wacky stuff for guests that had asked me for some funny, specific things that they wanted. So I'm wondering what you would have done. Would you have made sure that the guest request, as kooky as it was, and I mean, obviously there's a limit to what you would do, if it doesn't hurt the image of the restaurant or the experience of other guests. But in this case, it was in no way affecting other people's experience of that steakhouse. So I'm curious to know what you would have done and how you would have handled it, and maybe even if you know in your head right now that you wouldn't have done it, think of why you wouldn't have done it. Is it just out of laziness, out of you're too busy, or you know what, it's a stupid request, I don't have to abide by it? Because that couple mentioned how impacted they were by the fact that this manager would do this, and I guarantee you that this couple is definitely going to go back. They've definitely told that story to a lot of people by now, and it's been all over the internet and all over social media. So I'm sure she didn't do it for that reason. She didn't think it was going to come out of the restaurant, but it actually gave him a great publicity. And when you do nice things to people, you don't do them with the intent that it's going to provide you with free publicity. But if it does, then good. But even if just that couple and the story hadn't got on the restaurant, that couple would have told every one of their friends about what Sullivan Steakhouse had done for them. I remember working in a nice restaurant in a hotel. My goal is to provide an amazing experience for the guests. So when somebody would say, you have a bottle opener? Is it possible for you to have a bottle of wine? Can you bring it to the room later? I would go above and beyond and say, listen, bring me your bottle. I'll put it in the fridge for a while. Tell me when you guys go to the spa for a walk, and I'll make sure that it's in the room waiting for you with my bottle opener and 2 glasses of wine on ice, which I didn't have to do because it didn't come from our restaurant. But I helped their experience in our establishment. And guess where they wanted to go have a drink after and spend the evening and have food? They were maybe going out somewhere else for food, but after I'd taken care of them and showed them that I would go above and beyond, what was maybe expected of me, they wanted to spend more time with me, and I built that rapport with them, and then they would come and eat and have a bottle of wine with me from our menu. and I would create more sales for the business, make more tips in my pocket, and provide them with a better experience. And it would show in how they thanked me and the comments that they left after their visit. So sometimes it doesn't have to be much. It doesn't have to be, but are you listening to what your guests want? Sometimes it's not important to you. And yes, it's annoying because guests will absolutely want X table, or, by the window, or this one has too much wind, or this one. Yeah, it's annoying because we have to deal with a lot of these requests every day. But when you take time to listen to what they really want and make sure that their experience is to their liking, it doesn't have to be to your liking. It has to be to their liking. And if they feel that, it's too noisy here or too cold there, in a certain spot, it's not your position to discuss that, but it's to make sure that they get what they need for the money they spend with you. And the same experience can be very different from taking time to put that picture on the table, taking time to address special requests that they have. For the same amount of money, their perception of their experience can be very different, and you can fix that very easily. And to be honest, if you think about it, 80-90% of your tables don't have that special request. They might have a few things with food or things that they ask of you, but tables that actually ask specifically for a different table or to move here or to move there, they're few and far between, and these requests are very easy to achieve and to just make the guest that much happier. And that's more ROI for the experience that they have in your restaurant, and it costs you nothing in most cases. In this case, cost them a frame, but I think for the exposure it got them, that was well worth it. So that's our BB mention of the week to Sullivan Steakhouse in Indiana. Congratulations to them. And I hope that this gives you maybe ideas of things you can do for your guests. And now, in keeping in mind with the execution and with the guest experience and how to stand out, a lot of restaurants have some amazing wine lists, and a lot of other restaurants are very safe and play it safe on their wine list. A lot of New World stuff, U.S., Australia, easy drinking, approachable stuff. A little bit of French and Italian with some brands that are pretty known out there. But I find a lot of restaurants are pretty conservative in their wines. And I got to go to I get to go to a lot of wine tastings, but I got to go to a nice wine tasting from the Jura region in France last week that are famous for their Pulsar and Trousseau in the reds, and their Savagnin and Chardonnay and the whites that are very oxidized whites, and the Vin Jaune and Vin de Paille. Maybe not the most approachable region if you want to venture out of the standard stuff that you're used to. But this got me to think that you can maybe, without revamping your whole wine list, start yourself experimenting and experiencing other regions. And with the Google machine nowadays, you can easily go and search for different regions and different stuff, or even before that, go and find a restaurant's website that has a pretty extensive wine list, and see what kind of regions they have that you don't have. A lot of times it'll be more old world, but just in France, there's so many different regions. If you compare Burgundy to Bordeaux, obviously completely different wines, but you can go, like I said, in the Jura, you can go in the Loire Valley, the Languedoc in the south, the Côtes-du-Rhône. They're all different regions that all bring something completely different. And now I'm talking about France, but you can do the same thing in Italy. You can go in different European countries. You can even go in different regions in the United States. A lot of people go to California, but if you go to Oregon and Washington State, you make some beautiful Pinot Noirs. Willamette Valley and the Walla Walla and different places. But so basically, I don't want to make this about specific stuff about wine, but just to say, keep an open mind and maybe start yourself reading on some of these regions, and maybe comparing to wine lists, like I said, that are more extensive for other restaurants, but looking at other things that you can implement in your wine list. So go out, maybe try them at home at first, and you don't have to put them on the wine list forever. You could just have a special wine of the month. But so for your guests that are curious about wines, for your guests that want to try new things, there's definite things that are super food friendly. If you go in the Côtes-du-Rhône area in France, you can find some outstanding wines for actually a very decent price that you can pair with foods that are going to create a whole different experience for your guests. So keep in mind that there are other stuff, there are other regions, there are other wines out there. The best thing to do is for you to experiment them at home. Like I said, maybe you can bring a white and a red into your restaurant and try them as kind of like the wine of the month. but they're from a region that you don't usually have on your list, and your servers can talk about it with guests, and especially ones that are curious about wine, and that your regulars that are used to drinking the same old stuff on your wine list that can get to try something different. And if you commit to a case of a white wine and a case of red wine, you should be able to move that. If your team is on board, they get the information and they're excited about it, and they talk about it to the guest. That shouldn't be a problem for you. You're not going to sit on that stuff forever, but it's going to create a different experience for your guest, and it's going to open up a whole new world in the wine stuff. So just wanted to mention that. So I've been talking a lot about execution today, and one thing that we rarely talk about, that rarely gets touched on, but that is crucial in restaurants. And as I've been working in many different restaurants with owners and managers and teams recently, I've noticed that transition periods between day parts is in almost every restaurant a lot of times poorly executed. Even if they execute the service properly, they'll do a nice lunch service. In some places they do breakfast, dinner, whatever it is. The guests are really well greeted, served during peak hours. But when it's time to transition, this is where a lot of restaurants drop the ball. So just wanted to, kind of make you aware of that, have a little food for thought, and maybe realize if it's being done effectively in your restaurant. And sometimes people just don't even realize it's not being done because it's downtime, it's transition. We don't even give it attention. So just to be clear on what I'm talking about, basically, if you're doing breakfast and you turn into a lunch around 10:30, 11:30, and then you move to a lunch menu, or that period between, and the same thing in the afternoon, right? From when your lunch period ends around 2 or 3 o'clock and you transition into your dinner menu or the night service, some restaurants will just be closed, but most restaurants stay open. And there's a transition that's happening on the floor from one team that's doing the breakfast to the lunch, or the lunch team to the dinner team. So some people are getting cut, some people are done at 2, some people at 2:30, at 3 they're doing cash outs, new tables are coming in, and the hostess has just finished her shift, so that nobody's greeting them at the door. So a lot of times in those transitions is where we drop the ball. Some new servers coming in, but they thought it was the other server's table, but the other server got cut by the manager. So there's communication problems, execution problems. And we've served all the guests perfectly or really well at lunch and provide them with a really good experience. And then all of a sudden, a same guest that's spending, not the same guest, but a new guest that's spending the same kind of money as a guest that came during peak hour at 12:30 shows up at the 1:45, and they stand at the door and nobody notices them until finally somebody decides to have a reaction. And then they sit and they wait for a while because it's not clear whose section it is. Maybe some people got cut and the floor plan got redrawn, but the information wasn't shared with the servers, and it takes a while for the table to be greeted. And then in the kitchen, they're trying to prepare for the night shift, so execution is not as good as it was, during the peak hour. So obviously, there's stuff to be done for the night shift, but we need to realize that the guest experience, whether they come at 12:30 when we're full staffed and everybody's focused on the experience, and somebody coming at 2 o'clock, they're spending the same money. Their dollars worth the same amount, and maybe their schedule doesn't allow them to go out at 12:30. So why should their experience be lessened because you're transitioning? So this is something that I see in a lot of restaurants, and a lot of restaurants are not even aware of this. So this might be happening in your restaurant. So make sure that at transition time, everybody knows there's always at least a person responsible for the door. That means whether it's a hostess or a server or a bartender. Well, at this point, obviously, we have less people on the floor because otherwise our labor is going to be out of whack and the restaurant's not going to make money. But everybody needs to understand that there's a person responsible for the door. Same thing in the kitchen. You could be prepping, you can be filling up stations for the evening shift, but who's making sure that the orders that pop out of the printer get attended and get prepared as quickly as it is at 12:30, right? Because the dish costs the same price at 2 o'clock as it did at 12:30. So make sure that whether it's transitioning in the morning, transitioning in the afternoon, or even later at night for the last few tables, later at night, that they get the same experience and the same attention. Okay, you don't want to drop the ball, drop your game because there are quieter times. It doesn't mean the guest experience, they know as many people, they're, as your 12:30 guest, right? So it's not because they know less people. It's not, if they have a bad experience, they'll still talk about it. They'll still go online and maybe make comments about it on social media, and it's still going to affect people's perception, right? So yes, that there are transition periods that you have to go through and you have to manage. your labor and your staff and making sure that the team's efficient. But the guests shouldn't, feel that and shouldn't be on the receiving end of that transition. So just wanted to make sure, be aware that transitions are a very crucial moment in a lot of restaurants, and a lot of restaurants are not actually being really good at it. So make sure that the transition in your restaurant is done properly and that no guests suffer. And to close things off, I want to tell you about something that I came across the last few days, and it seems like it's been popping up a lot on social media the last few days. So apparently the U.S. government, to be more specific, the U.S. Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau has given the go-ahead to a company called Palcohol that wants to start selling a powdered alcohol brand. So basically they have powdered vodka and powdered rum, and then some powdered cocktails like a Cosmo or lemon drop. So I was kind of curious to see what kind of a reaction this would get from people, for especially as it goes with underage drinking, or actually in this case, underage alcohol consumption. Apparently, the company Palcohol's website, says that you can bring discrete packets into venues that overcharge for booze, like concerts, cruise ships, and sporting events. So I don't know how the people operating these sites or businesses are going to be feeling about people bringing powdered alcohol. Basically, just simply add water and make a real cocktail. So apparently, their website also says that they acknowledge that snorting alcohol is a possibility, but it encourages users to not do anything stupid with it. So it seems to me like not a bad idea. I just don't see much use personally for it. I just see more maybe trouble with it, right? Much harder to control little packets of powder than it is to control a big bottle of vodka. So I'm wondering with underage drinking or underage alcohol consumption, if that's something that's going to be hard to control. And I wonder how people operating businesses will feel about people bringing their powdered booze in to throw into water. So, and how they'll be handling that, right? Kind of like, how do you handle somebody trying to bring food in your restaurant from the outside? Now, if people have to start bringing their own booze, which is where a lot of restaurants make a lot of money and make more profit on these specific items. So I'm kind of curious to get your feedback. Drop me a line on the blog, or even send me an email at info@rbbsolutions.com. But I'm curious to get your take on it. I'm wondering where this is going to go. So I guess it was approved there. I don't know if it needs, other approval, or if it's going to be, how it's going to be sold. It's going to be sold in liquor stores, I guess, and have to be, right? So Palcohol is now looking at selling powdered alcohol. So give me your thoughts on that, and you can definitely Google that if you want to have more information on it. Apparently, the product will be available in fall of 2014. So I'm sure we'll hear more about it. But if you haven't heard about it, just go check it out and give me your opinion on it. So on this note, I want to thank you very much for having listened to the third installment of the Restaurant Show podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Wells. And if you enjoy any of this, please don't be shy and share it through social media. That's the only way that we can get the good word out and get more people involved in this and growing this community and getting people's feedback and questions. If you ever have any ideas of topics that you think should be discussed on here, please, you can easily find me online. Don't be shy to give me your comments. I'd love to hear them. I hope you have a great day. I hope business is good in your restaurant this week. Summer is upon us. The weather's getting better everywhere. Let's go out there, impress your guests, have the execution right, build those relationships, and have an outstanding summer ahead. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.